Hello, dear listener. My name is Rose, and I am the writer, director, etc. of this podcast audio drama. Sorry about the delay in getting these episodes out, and thank you so much for all your kind support and patience. I would like to welcome you to our 5th season of the Wessex dramas with an adaptation of Thomas Hardy's novel, The Trumpet Major. As with our last few, this is of course a romance story with some light-hearted shenanigans. Anne has to choose from 3 suitors of varying levels of suitableness, all while King George and his entire court come to their small local town of Weymouth to survey the possible invasion of Napoleon. And by the way, it is that King George, the insane one, before he went insane, you know. So pop on your mob cap, loosen your stays, and vaguely curse at the French, and let's sit down to watch the unfortunate attempts of young romance to blossom.
Chapter 76, External, Overcome Church, Day. The miller and his new wife emerge to the rice confetti and greetings of their families and friends. John, in best regimentals, sadly watches Anne as she throws rice and smiles at her mother. He looks very pale. Chapter 77, Internal, Millhouse, Parlour, Day. There is the sound of raucous merrymaking in the kitchen and dining room, and the scraping of a fiddle. But the miller and his new family are gathered in the parlour. The miller, watched by Anne, is fondly helping to remove his new wife's cream veil, which has got caught up in her pink bonnet, and Bob and John are standing near to the door.
You didn't overtake her then?
Bob shrugs.
No, I shall let her drift anyway.
John seizes and pumps his brother's hand.
Oh, I'm glad, Bob. You've been wise. You have.
The miller comes towards them, and John drops Bob's hand and turns to his father.
Father, I've just come to tell you that I have to go. Now. And the regiment leaves tomorrow as well. The king then leaves here next week.
The miller seizes John's hand.
Oh, I'm right sorry for that, my lad. You'll see us later before you go, though.
I'll try to, Father. But if I can't, you can come out and see the full regiment off. I might be able to get a glimpse of you all as I leave. Revelry will sound at 5:30, and we shall leave at 8. Perhaps we shall come and camp here again next summer. I don't know, though.
The miller pumps his son's hand, emotionally lost for words.
Thank you. And I wish the very best for you both, stepmother.
Bless ye, lad.
The trumpet major looks at Anne, who half smiles at him coolly. He smiles, bows to them all, and then leaves. Chapter 79, Internal, Miller's House, Kitchen, Day. The Lovedays come into the kitchen, where Bob is sitting at the table, moping over a paper copy of the wedding banns. The ladies greet him, divest themselves of their outer garments, and start making breakfast and setting the table with David. The miller removes his jacket and waistcoat and starts to put on a big white apron. He addresses his son.
I wouldn't be always making a fanton about that Matilda, son, or folk might call you a fool and say thy brains had turned to water.
Bob looks up and pushes away the copy of the banns.
Matilda Johnson, spinster of the parish. Humph. You're right, father. I'll be made a fool of no more.
He shrugs.
But how to begin? I can't stop ailing yet.
The miller pats him on the shoulder.
Take it careless, my son. Lay your zen out to snacks and cordials, but do you keep off the hard liquor, though?
David leans in.
And I shall make ye a rich seed cake that'll open up to a knife like a freckled buttercup.
And there's baccy.
Bob nods and gets up.
Thanks, father.
He stalks off. Mrs. Garland smiles at her new husband, who sits down at the table, picks up his knife and fork, and noisily bangs their ends on the table at the place setting, in comic, eager expectation of food. He smiles back fondly at her. He then widens his eyes and wiggles his eyebrows in faux seduction. Anne regards him and then looks away in teenaged horror and disgust at the thought of aged lovers. Chapter 80. External, Internal, Miller's House, Day. Montage of Bob sitting in his room, whittling a stick in a cloud of pipe smoke. Bob out riding, cantering up a hill. Bob catching an eel. Bob at the kitchen table, being given an omelette by David, who slides it out of the pan and points out its fillings. Chapter 81. Internal, Mrs. Loveday's old house portion, Anne's old bedroom. Anne is sitting on a stool up to a table, copying one of her father's watercolours. Suddenly, a saw pushes its way through the wall partition and starts to saw up and down. Anne regards the saw with resignation. When the saw has sawn all the way around a door-type outline, there is a great knocking and pushing, and suddenly the door swings open and Bob stands there, covered in plaster dust. Anne stands up, a bit alarmedly. Bob grins and removes his cap.
I beg your ladyship's pardon, but I didn't know this door opened into your private room.
It doesn't matter. I can get another.
She peers through the passageway, gets up and steps through, curiously.
It leads to the mill. Would you like to come and see it? I'm practising being a grinder.
Chapter 82. Internal, Mill, Day. Montage of They're looking at the mill and going up and down steps, looking at the hatch, through to the wheel, and at the grinding stones, etc. Anne then smiles, nods, and leaves Bob, returning to her mother. Chapter 83. External, Internal, the Miller's House, Day, Night. Montage of Bob regaling the family around the fire in the evening and ending the tale by glancing at Anne, who smiles coolly and looks away. Bob passing a dish of food to Anne at the table in the dining room and being coolly but politely refused. Bob smiling and standing out of the way when they both come to go through the same doorway at the same time. Bob bringing out a small bottle of cider for Anne into the garden. She coolly nods and he opens it for her, produces a glass and pours the cider out for her, putting it down on her nearby table. Bob leans over and addresses Anne.
I made something for you, Miss Garland. Can I show it to you, please?
Anne looks around.
Where is it?
Oh, it's out by the bridge at the millhead. I made it on purpose, especially for you.
He smiles shyly. Anne stands up and he leads her up the hill behind the mill, walking ahead of her. Chapter 84. External, Millhead Bridge, Day. As they approach the Millhead Bridge, Anne can see a mechanism covered by a big dark cloth set in the damp breeze near the top of the wheel and just below the bridge. Bob smiles and whips off the cloth dramatically. The surprise is an Aeolian harp which begins, now its cloth is removed, to play its strange harmonies which mingle with the plash of the water.
I made it for you, Miss Garland.
Anne smiles at him.
Oh, an Aeolian harp. Thank you, Bob. It's amazing. How did you come to think of it?
Bob looks a bit furtive and embarrassed. He shrugs.
Oh, I don't know. It's the first one I ever made.
The harp sings to itself. Chapter 85. Internal, Millhouse, Anne's bedroom, night. Anne leans out of her window and listens to the harp against the plash of the water. It is a beautiful clear night. She smiles. Chapter 86. External, Garden, Day. Anne is sewing on a chair in the garden, near to a small work table. Bob appears and addresses her.
Miss Garland, I just popped out to say as perhaps I took too much credit to myself yesterday.
Anne looks up.
What? How?
Well, Though I didn't make the heart for you, the idea was actually my brother's. I know that I didn't do a very good job of it, though.
Oh, John's idea.
She looks vexed.
It is a very incomplete instrument, certainly.
Maybe I should take it down. We won't want you always to be thinking of those not present, do we?
No, perhaps taking it down is best, Captain Robert.
Right, Miss Anne.
Bob nods ruefully and walks away. Chapter 87. External, Millhouse, Garden, Day. Anne is sitting reading in the summer house when Bob comes out and starts painting. They greet each other. Anne then starts to get her things together prior to leaving, but Bob addresses her.
No, don't leave, Miss Anne. I'm just painting this high bit here.
He reaches up with the brush to try and paint the eaves area. Anne watches him and smiles.
You seem to be having problems as you're not tall enough.
Bob looks chagrined.
You never used to say things like that to me, Miss Anne.
Anne takes the paint can from him.
Look, I'll hold the can so you don't have to keep stepping down.
Thank you, if you would.
You do it quite well, but I suppose that not quite so much art is needed to paint a summer house as to paint a picture.
You definitely didn't used to talk like that to me.
Anne shrugs and stares into the green paint can.
I'd like to give pain to the people who have given pain to me.
Bob stares at her and then puts down his brush on the sill.
Oh, Miss Anne, I ask your pardon for that. It was stupid forgetting of thee for a time.
He attempts to take her hand, but fails.
Dear Anne, how well we knew each other as children. You was a queen to me then, so you are now, and always.
Very pretty, and it's only... Ooh, how many? 6 weeks since Miss Johnson?
Zounds, don't say anything about that. I never deliberately loved her. It was a sudden sort of thing that came upon me. But towards you, I have respectfully loved and honoured you all my life, on and off.
Anne shrugs again.
I'm willing to believe you, Captain Robert, but I see no use in solemn declarations.
We could renew our previous promises.
Anne smiles, puts down the can, picks up her book and walks off towards the house.
No! No promises.
Bob looks after her, spoonily. Chapter 88. Internal, Mill, Dining Room, Evening. Bob is seated at the table and Anne is arranging the napkins and lighting the candles. Bob addresses Anne worriedly.
I beg of you, Anne, just let me know your whole mind on this subject and then I can maybe clear things up.
Captain Loveday, I'll tell you one thing that disturbs me. You are too easily impressed by new faces, especially young female ones, and this gives me a very bad opinion of you. Very bad.
Realisation dawns on Bob's face.
Oh, that's it. But I can...
Her stepfather finished at the mill. I'll go help Mother to dish.
Anne marches out. Chapter 89. External, Day. Montage of. The family toasting one another next to a Christmas tree with the fire roaring. Festus riding past the house front and peering over the hedge to try and glimpse Anne, who is not there. Mrs. Loveday seeing him from the window. The miller coming into the kitchen in his volunteer military outfit and exhibiting himself to the family with twirls and courtly bows. There is lots of laughing and clapping. The snow falls outside. Bob passing Festus as the two of them struggle their way through the high wind on the road. Bob nods and Festus surlily scowls back. Chapter 90. Internal, Miller's house, sitting room, day. It's raining hard. Mrs. Loveday is sitting on the window seat, sewing with Anne nearby. She sees Festus walking in the torrential rain and then enter for shelter the Loveday's open shed near to the front gate. Mrs. Loveday taps on the window and beckons Festus in. He quickly complies, walking up to the meal house. Chapter 91, Internal, Hallway, Day. As Festus comes into the hall, Anne is just seen whisking out of it through another entrance.
Good morning, Mr. Derryman.
Good morning. There now. That's just as I thought it would be.
Sorry, Mr. Derryman?
Oh, nothing. Howsomever, you know well enough, ma'am, for all her pretence, but I'll bring her the book yet. She should drop a little haughty airs with me.
But you must treat her with politeness, sir.
Don't tell me of politeness. She's always getting one over on me. I hate it.
But you'll stay until the ring has passed.
No, I'm a soldier. I don't mind rain. I'm off. I know when I'm not wanted.
He goes back out and slams the door. Chapter 92, External, Field Footpath, Outside Mill, Day. The miller, together with Bob and Anne, are standing in their Sunday best on the footpath in the pasture just outside the side gate. The miller is regarding his watch and Bob is switching the nettles. The miller addresses Anne.
Will she be long, do you think, Anne?
Oh, not long now, stepfather. She doesn't want to be late for church.
What's that?
He points. A soldier walks across to a big tree at a sort of crossroad of paths in the field off to the side of the meal house. He nails a big notice to it and then walks away. Anne scrutinises the notice and then sets off across the pasture to read it.
May I come with you, Miss Anne?
I can hardly stop you.
No, I mean walk with you.
Anne shrugs. By now, Bob is actually walking alongside of her.
Then walk behind me. Not so close.
Bob drops obediently behind. Anne addresses him over her shoulder.
It serves you right, you know.
I'm sorry about Matilda, but I hope that you won't always make me walk behind you, you know.
I don't want people thinking that I'm interested in you. Knowing what I do of your weakness, and how can I do otherwise? You might engage yourself to the fishmonger's daughter tomorrow.
Oh, Anne, if ever I do win you, I am sure I shall have earned you.
Anne pulls ahead a little as they near the tree.
You are not what you want to seem to be. I don't quite like to let myself love you.
Chapter 93, External, Big Tree to Side of Mill, Day. Anne and Bob read the notice as the miller and Mrs. Loveday leave the side of the house and set off across the field to join their children. The notice is headed with the King's Arms and entitled, Addressed to all ranks and descriptions of Englishmen. Anne reads aloud.
Friends and countrymen, the French are now assembling the largest force that ever was prepared to invade this kingdom. On this occasion, no man's service is compelled, but you are invited, voluntarily, to come forward in defence of what is dear to you, by entering your names on the lists which are held by the thring man of every parish. Rouse, therefore, and unite as one man in the best of causes. United, we may defy the world to conquer us. But victory will never belong to those who are slothful and unprepared.
I must go and join. Again. At once.
Oh, Bob, I wish we lived further from the coast.
Anywhere would be paradise to me, if only you would make it so, Anne.
Anne turns away towards the church.
It isn't right to talk so lightly at such a time.
She continues along a footpath towards the church and Bob follows very closely behind. The miller and his wife are now beginning to approach the tree with its notice.
was an episode of The Trumpet Major, written by Thomas Hardy and adapted by me and my co-writer Anne-Marie Goldthorp. I would like to thank our new editor for this episode, Franziska Schriek. I would also like to thank our amazing cast: Mike Joy, Oliver Hickey, Stephen Marshall, Izzy Joy, Mike Staddon, Caro Joy, Dan Almond, Neil Highley, John Simpson, John Steele, Peter Allison, and Alban O'Brien. You can find us on YouTube under Rose Goldthorp Films. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. We might be in a few other places, but currently that is debatable. We are also on the Thomas Hardy Society website and also on our own website, The Daily Dilettante. If you want more updates on what's going on with the podcast and with its subsequent films, you can sign up to our newsletter from the Rose Goldthorp website and I believe the Daily Dilettante website, or you can just check in on our Instagram and Facebook on Rose Goldthorp Films. I tend to update those semi-regularly. Anyway, thank you so much for your hard work and support and kindness, and chat to you next time, kids.